Life has a way of catching you off guard, doesn't it? One moment, everything seems perfectly ordinary, and the next, something happens that changes everything. That's exactly how I felt that afternoon. It was a quiet Sunday, and my house was filled with the gentle hum of the washing machine. I had finally decided to tackle a task I'd been avoiding for months, sorting through the attic. Dust floated in the sunlight as I sifted through old memories, faded letters, forgotten books, and clothes that no longer fit. Then, I found it. A red silk dress. The moment my fingers brushed against the fabric, memories surged back. I used to wear this dress on summer nights, feeling like nothing in the world could touch me. Out of nostalgia, I held it up to the light, then, on impulse, slipped it on. I twirled in front of the mirror, the fabric flowing around me, wrapping me in a piece of my past. And then, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Heart pounding slightly, I hurried downstairs, the hem of the dress brushing against my knees. As I opened the door, I froze. Standing there, toolbox in hand, was Nathan, my cousin. Or at least, he used to be. Now, at 25, he was no longer the lanky boy I remembered. He had grown into a man with sharp features, a quiet confidence in his stance, and an intensity in his eyes that made it hard to hold his gaze for too long. "Lena," he said, his voice deeper than I remembered. "You called about the leaky sink?" Oh, right. I had called him days ago about fixing the kitchen sink. I'd completely forgotten. "Yeah," I said, stepping aside, my pulse still slightly erratic. "Come in." As Nathan entered, I caught him glance at me briefly, just a flicker of something in his expression before he looked away. I brushed it off. Maybe he was just surprised to see me in a dress. I barely wore them these days. He set his toolbox on the counter and started working under the sink. Meanwhile, I returned to my boxes, pretending to focus, but my mind kept drifting back to him. Something about Nathan felt different. I just didn't know why. The rhythmic clinking of tools echoed from the kitchen, blending with the occasional muttered curse as Nathan worked under the sink. I tried to keep my attention on the old photo albums in front of me, but my mind had already wandered elsewhere. Something about his presence unsettled me. Not in a bad way, just different. "Nathan, can you come here for a sec?" His voice broke through my thoughts. I set down a stack of photos and made my way to the kitchen. He was crouched beneath the sink, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms marked with faint scratches, signs of someone who wasn't afraid of hard work. "I need you to hold this for me," he said, handing me a wrench. I kneeled beside him, taking the tool. The space was tight, and our shoulders brushed slightly as I steadied the wrench. It was a small, insignificant moment. But for some reason, my heart skipped. "Got it?" he asked. I nodded, hoping he didn't notice the way my fingers had tensed slightly against the metal. "All right, hold steady," Nathan murmured, his focus shifting back to the pipe. I could feel the faint warmth of his presence beside me, the subtle scent of his cologne, a mix of cedarwood and something faintly citrus. I swallowed. This was ridiculous. He was my cousin. We'd grown up together. There was no reason for me to feel off balance. After a moment, he tightened the last bolt and pulled away, exhaling in satisfaction. "There," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Should be good as new." I forced a smile. "You're a lifesaver." He grinned. "Family discount." His words were casual, but there was something in his expression, something uncertain. A flicker of hesitation before he turned away, packing up his tools. I should have let it go, but something inside me told me I'd regret it if I didn't ask. "Nathan," I said, hesitating. "Are you okay?" He looked up, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" I shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "I don't know. You just seem different. For a second, I thought he was going to brush it off. But then, his lips pressed into a thin line, and he sighed. It's nothing, he said. I've just been thinking a lot lately. I raised an eyebrow. About what? Nathan hesitated, then shook his head with a half smile. It's not important. Something in my chest tightened, but I let it go. If he wanted to tell me, he would. As he gathered his tools, he paused in the doorway. You know, Lena, he said, voice quieter now. It's been a long time since we've really talked. Maybe we should catch up sometime. I blinked. That was unexpected. Still, I found myself nodding. Yeah, that sounds nice. He gave me one last unreadable look before heading out. I watched him walk to his car, a strange mix of curiosity and unease settling over me. Something told me this wasn't just a casual visit. I just didn't know why. That night, I tried to focus on the book in my hands, but the words blurred together. No matter how hard I tried to distract myself, my mind kept circling back to Nathan. Something about our conversation, about the way he looked at me before leaving, felt unfinished. I curled up on the couch, pulling a blanket over my legs as the hum of the television filled the quiet. But even as I stared at the screen, I wasn't really watching. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Nathan. Hey, thanks again for letting me help today. Hope the sink's still holding up. I hesitated before replying. Something about his message felt heavier than just a check-in. Me. Yeah, it's working perfectly. Thanks again. A moment passed. The screen lit up again. Nathan. I wasn't just talking about the sink. I meant it. I've missed you. It's been too long. I sat up straighter, my pulse quickening. What was he trying to say? Nathan and I had always been close growing up. We spent summers together at our grandparents' house, ran barefoot through fields, and whispered secrets in tree houses. But life happened. We grew up. We drifted apart. I took a deep breath and typed back carefully. Me. It has been a while. We should catch up soon. Almost immediately, his response came. Nathan. How about lunch? Just us. I hesitated. It was a simple request, nothing unusual. But something about the way he phrased it, just us, made my stomach flip. I was overthinking this. I took another breath and replied. Me. Lunch sounds great. Let me know when. Nathan. Tomorrow? My treat. So soon? I stared at the screen for a long moment before finally replying. Me. Okay, tomorrow it is. I set my phone down, but the unease didn't fade. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe this was just a normal lunch between two family members who hadn't seen each other in a while. But deep down, I had a feeling. Tomorrow's lunch wouldn't be just a meal. It would be the beginning of something I wasn't sure I was ready for. The next day arrived faster than I expected. I stood in front of my closet, staring at my clothes for far too long. This was ridiculous. Why was I overthinking what to wear? It was just lunch with Nathan. After a deep breath, I grabbed a simple blouse and jeans, something comfortable but presentable. Still, as I caught my reflection in the mirror, I couldn't ignore the nervous energy buzzing inside me. What was I so anxious about? By the time I arrived at the little cafe Nathan had chosen, he was already there, sitting by the window. He stood when he saw me, a warm smile spreading across his face. Lena. He pulled out a chair for me. You look nice. Thanks, I said, suddenly feeling self-conscious. This place is cute. I thought you'd like it, he said, settling across from me. The cafe was small, intimate, the kind of place where conversations felt quieter, more personal. We placed our orders, and for the first few minutes we talked easily, about work, about life, about the things we'd missed while we drifted apart. But as the conversation moved forward, something shifted. Nathan leaned forward slightly, his expression turning serious. Lena, I've been thinking a lot lately. I raised an eyebrow. About what? He hesitated. I watched as his fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup, as if searching for the right words. About us, he said finally. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Nathan, I began cautiously. What do you mean? He let out a quiet breath, shaking his head as if frustrated with himself. I don't know how to explain it. I miss how things used to be. And I don't mean just as family. My stomach flipped. I swallowed, keeping my voice steady. Nathan, we've always been close. It's normal to feel nostalgic. It's not just nostalgia, he said, his gaze locking onto mine. I've realized something, Lena, and I don't know if I can keep ignoring it. My pulse pounded in my ears. Nathan? You don't have to say anything, he cut in quickly. I needed to be honest with you. Silence stretched between us. I could feel the weight of his words pressing into the space around us, making it harder to breathe. I wasn't sure what I felt. Confusion, hesitation, maybe even a quiet understanding I wasn't ready to admit. The rest of lunch was quieter. We talked about safe topics, avoiding what had just been said. But as I left the cafe, I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. The drive home felt longer than usual. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel as I replayed Nathan's words over and over in my mind. It's not just nostalgia. I've realized something. What did that mean? I should have asked. I should have pressed him for clarity. But the moment had felt too heavy, too delicate, like a thin layer of ice I wasn't ready to step on. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sky had darkened, painting the world in deep shades of blue and gray. I let out a long breath and rested my forehead against the steering wheel. Why was I so rattled? It was just Nathan, my cousin, someone I'd known my entire life. And yet, the way he looked at me today, it wasn't the same. It wasn't the easy, familiar gaze I remembered from childhood. There was something else in his eyes, something unreadable. I stepped inside my house, locking the door behind me. Everything was exactly as I had left it, but somehow, it felt different. As if the air had shifted, as if my reality had been slightly rewritten. I moved toward the kitchen, absent-mindedly pouring myself a glass of water, trying to push the feeling away. Then, my phone buzzed on the counter. I hesitated before picking it up. Nathan. Hey, thanks for today. I know I might have made things weird. I didn't mean to. A beat of silence stretched through the room as I stared at the message. I should brush it off, tell him it was nothing. But instead I found myself typing, carefully, hesitantly. Me. It's okay. I just wasn't expecting it. A minute passed, then another. My phone lit up again. Nathan. I wasn't expecting it either. I swallowed. Me. Then why did you say it? There was a longer pause this time. And then, Nathan. Because I can't pretend anymore. I set my phone down, my heart thudding in my chest. A part of me wanted to call him right then and ask him what he meant. Another part wanted to ignore it altogether, let it disappear into the void of unanswered conversations. Instead, I typed the only thing I could think of. Me. Nathan. What are we doing? His response came almost immediately. Nathan. I don't know, but don't you think we should find out? I stared at the message, the weight of his words sinking in. The truth was, I didn't have an answer. But maybe, just maybe, I wanted to find out too. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I tossed and turned, my mind tangled in Nathan's words. I can't pretend anymore. What did he mean by that? And why did it make my stomach twist in a way I couldn't explain? By the time morning arrived, I was exhausted. Dark circles lined my eyes as I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. brushing my hair back into a loose ponytail. Maybe I was reading too much into this. Maybe Nathan was just going through something, feeling lonely, and I was his closest connection to the past. That made sense, right? I exhaled sharply and grabbed my phone. My fingers hovered over his name. I wanted to say something, but I had no idea what. Before I could decide, my phone buzzed, his name lighting up the screen. My heart kicked up in my chest. I hesitated, then answered. Hey. Hey, Nathan said, his voice softer than usual. Did I wake you? No, I was already up. A pause. Then, can I see you? I swallowed. When? Now. I hesitated. It was early. Too early for a casual visit. And yet, I found myself nodding before I could stop myself. Yeah, okay. 20 minutes later, I heard the familiar sound of his car pulling into my driveway. I opened the door before he could knock. Nathan stood there, hands in his pockets, looking different. Like he hadn't slept either. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he exhaled. Can I come in? I stepped aside, letting him in. The air inside felt heavier with him here, like something unspoken was lingering between us. He walked a few steps into the living room, then turned back toward me. Lena, he started, then stopped, running a hand through his hair. I don't know how to say this without making things more complicated. My pulse quickened. Then say it anyway. He let out a quiet, almost nervous chuckle. All right. Then he looked at me. Really looked at me. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't just nostalgia. This wasn't just a longing for the past. This was something else entirely. Something I wasn't ready for. Something I couldn't ignore. I think, Nathan said, his voice almost a whisper. I've always felt this way. The air in the room shifted. A line had been crossed, and neither of us could go back now. Silence hung between us, heavy and thick, like the air before a storm. Nathan's words echoed in my mind. I think I've always felt this way. My throat felt dry. My pulse roared in my ears. I could say something. I could stop this. I could push everything back where it belonged, into the past, into a place where it was just childhood memories and family ties. But I didn't move. Nathan took a slow step forward, hesitating, as if he was giving me time to pull away. Lena, I don't want to mess things up, but I can't keep pretending that this doesn't exist. What is this? I whispered. He exhaled, shaking his head with a slight smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. You know what it is. I did, and that terrified me. I lowered my gaze, staring at the floor, at the space between us that was quickly disappearing. Nathan, this isn't how things are supposed to be. Maybe not, he admitted. But what if that doesn't matter? I looked up then, meeting his gaze. There was no hesitation in his eyes, no second guessing, just quiet, patient certainty. Something in me broke, or maybe something finally gave in. I took a shaky breath. If we do this, if we cross this line, we can't undo it. Nathan nodded. I know. I searched his face for doubt, for any sign that this was just a fleeting thought, a moment of impulse. But there was none. I wasn't sure how long we stood there, both waiting for the other to back down. Neither of us did. Then, so slowly I barely registered the movement, Nathan reached for my hand. His fingers brushed against mine, just enough to send a jolt through my skin. I didn't pull away, and in that moment, everything shifted. This was happening. There was no turning back now. Nathan's fingers curled around mine, gentle but steady, as if he was waiting for me to make the final decision. A decision I wasn't sure I was ready for. My breath came uneven. I knew what this meant, what this would change. Everything. The rules we'd followed, the way the world had defined us, it would all unravel the second I accepted what was happening. But maybe it had already unraveled. Nathan watched me carefully, his thumb tracing absent circles over my knuckles. Lena, if this is too much, if you need time. I don't need time. The words escaped before I could stop them. Nathan stilled, his expression unreadable. Then what do you need? I swallowed, forcing myself to meet his gaze. I need to know this isn't just a moment. It's not. His voice was firm, unwavering. I don't think it ever was. I inhaled sharply. What if we regret this? He smiled faintly, shaking his head. What if we don't? My heart pounded against my ribs, fighting against every voice in my head telling me to stop this before it was too late. But it was already too late. Nathan squeezed my hand once, then let it go, as if giving me one last chance to walk away. I didn't. Instead, I stepped closer. Just enough that I could feel the warmth of him, the quiet weight of his presence. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Nathan's voice was soft, careful. So, where do we go from here? I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I don't know, I admitted, but I think we should find out. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face. One step at a time? I nodded. One step at a time. And just like that, the world shifted again. Only this time, I wasn't afraid to follow where it led.